Austin is a horrible track for degradation. So we're probably going to see great things from Nico Hülkenberg in qualifying again. We've been seeing it all year.
And even down to the fact that if you want to do it the way Lewis did it and be a karting professional first and then go from karting and push through, they're all going to start doing it.
Valtteri Bottas.
That is a
Correct.
made...
Valtteri Bottas doesn't mind being a number 2 driver.
Yeah.
Our favourite quote, or your favourite quote that you've told me a few times this season, he never missed out on Q3 in the Mercedes. That's all he needs to do in that Red Bull is back it up. He's the dream number 2 to Max Verstappen. Hello and welcome back to the On Track GP podcast, where we're in a mid-week episode, meaning that we don't have a race just happened or a race imminently about to happen. But fortunately, I am joined by 2 wonderful people, Richard Bradley and Jamie Chambers. How are you, Richard?
Cold.
We just said we weren't going to mention how cold it is in here. Richard's first word is it's cold. Jamie, how are you?
I'm awesome. I'm just happy to be here.
Tell me a little bit about what are the difficulties the drivers might face when we go to Texas?
Your car's never really perfect there because you have to compromise it for such different characteristics. It's also one of those circuits where, again, like Silverstone, Suzuka, the corners lead into one into another. So if you make a mistake at the beginning of the sections, it then lasts throughout the whole thing. So mistakes get really punished there. The other interesting thing is Austin has extreme weather seasons. You know, it gets really cold in winter, often gets snowed under, and then in the summer you get brutal Texas heat. And so the surface generates a lot of bumps. And every year that we go there, there's always an issue with the bumps, especially down the back straight and braking for, I think it's turn 11. And so, to be honest, we'll see after first practice how bad the bumps are this year, but that can cause a lot of issues.
And given that it's a sprint weekend as well, drivers are not going to have a lot of time to bed into that.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Very short learning curve, especially if you're any of the drivers that have not seen this track before.
Exactly, and that's also the other thing. Austin, because especially that first sector, it's so open. It's very, very hard to actually get visual references there because you haven't, it's just tarmac and painted tarmac through the S's. So it does take a long time to learn. I remember when I was first getting in the car there, we've got 3 drivers and I was going in second. And I'd done the track walk and everything. I'd done the sim and everything like that. But because it all looked so similar, I was waiting for the car to arrive in the box. And I was just going, hang on a sec. It's that first sector with the S's. It goes left, right, wait.
Or does it stop right and then good luck?
Then on the out lap, you're like, oh, okay. Now I
once you're
remember.
off that racing line once, that's it for the rest of that lap.
That's it. You're completely
Wow.
screwed. It's intense, but honestly, from a fan's perspective, one of the best races out there. From a diet perspective, complete disaster. Some of the best brisket in the world, I tell you.
As long as you're not doing weigh-ins before.
Exactly.
And a treat for the eyes seeing Daniel Ricciardo ride in on a horse or something else this year.
similar,
And a Stetson, definitely.
Exactly. Well, we do have some late upgrades coming as well. Haas have said that they're going to bring some very late upgrades this late in the season, and they're also going to be running some special race suits. Do you think that's going to do anything to Haas's season?
I'm not going to do any sort of like Haas beat in here.
Yeah.
But Haas's season has been run for quite a while now.
Lap 4 of Bahrain, I think, pretty much.
But in terms of, they've got a good driver set up. The car, it lasts to the end of a Grand Prix is pretty much all you can say.
The tyres don't, but the car does.
The tyres don't. No, that's a negligible thing to talk about. I think we're going to be talking about it because they are an American team, really. That's probably the biggest part of it, and soon to be not the only American team. But that's pretty much all we can say about Haas at this point.
But the other thing, as well as you picked up on it there, Austin is a horrible track for degradation. So we're probably going to see great things from Nico Hülkenberg in qualifying again. We've been seeing it all year.
Every time Hulk seems to pull something out
exactly.
of the bag.
But then unfortunately by about lap 5, I think it's going to be same
when
old.
he's 16th.
Yeah.
Add a 1 to whatever number he qualified in.
One other thing that's sort of been doing the rounds a little bit this week is the FIA are looking to speak to Lewis Hamilton again after his collision with George, because he was then seen walking on the track. Now, the implications of that being, they're saying that might have an impact on younger drivers.
Yes.
Because if Lewis Hamilton walks on the track after a crash, well, then so can I. Thoughts on that, Jamie?
One of the biggest things with Formula One, and we sort of touched on it when we were talking last week, we don't talk about Formula One drivers in the way that we talk about like footballers and rugby players. We talk about them as a personality that is integral to the team and the car. Lewis, more so than most, is very much in the public eye. He has a very sort of outspoken opinion on a lot of things, and he has a huge following. As soon as Lewis does something like that, Because we don't say, oh, Hamilton got out of the car and walked away. Lewis got out of the car.
Like
Lewis walked across the track. It's hugely influential. And when a driver shirks rules like that, because it's all fun and games when it's a raccoon on the drive or a Komodo dragon on the racetrack. That's fine. But a race driver doing that, it's a huge no-no, and it's setting a dangerous precedent, I think.
Yeah, the picture didn't look good, did it, Richard?
No, it's true, and I feel for Lewis because I've been in that position before, and you're completely wired, full of adrenaline, and the only thing you want to do at that point is get back to your garage, your transport, and just sit down in a corner alone, and you're completely wired, so that's the only thing you're thinking about at that time, and but I also don't like the way that the FIA have gone about it, because you say, you're quite right that Lewis is an entity and someone we look up to and almost he's an icon. But for any other driver, we look at drivers as just another helmet. We don't care whether it's Verstappen, Max, or someone down the road. It's a helmet, and you've seen plenty of examples of drivers walking across the circuit in the past and nothing's been said or done about it. Yeah. I think a prime example was when Max and Lewis actually crashed at Monza Turn 1 of the chicane. Max walked across the track. There was apparently, I haven't seen this, but if it's true, there was an example of Sargent doing it at Suzuka.
Oh, really?
I didn't see it myself, but I read about it. Now, I feel that it's almost like they've picked on this particular example because it is Lewis and they want to make a stand. I feel like if they had worded it that there's a continuing trend of this happening and we need to address it, I think that's actually fair enough.
So by singling him out, it's actually becoming more of a negative stigma than it needs to be.
It becomes a sort of, the one thing we always complain about with the officials and the FIA is inconsistencies, and this isn't doing anything to help that.
Yeah. No, you're right. But, I mean, it is a huge safety thing, and it is something that wherever you've gone off, you leave at that point, and that should be the end of the discussion. You are a highly skilled professional. You're making a conscious decision to do the opposite. So from that side of things, especially when you've got young drivers that are coming into the sport, and even down to the fact that if you want to do it the way Lewis did it and be a karting professional first and then go from karting and push through, they're all going to start doing it.
Because it's actually more dangerous to do it in karting than it would be in Formula One. Because at least Formula One, okay, the oddity is that, there might be a car stalled on the grid or go in the pit lane that you don't know about. But in a normal situation, at least Formula One, you've got probably 1.5 to 2 minutes before the cars come around. I mean, there are some kart tracks in the UK where it's a 30-second lap. So, the field comes round.
20 cars or 20 karts.
Exactly. And the field comes round pretty quick. And a lot of kart circuits are blind. So it's actually more dangerous in karting. So if the FIA came out and said, okay, this is a precedent we want to try and stop, I'm all for it. But I think the way they've singled out that incident without referring to others is, again, it just goes against the consistencies.
I think that is sort of a recurring issue with Lewis Hamilton and Formula One in general, and there are a plethora of times where it's either Lewis is outspoken about something or Lewis has done something, and more times than not it's cast in a negative way. And you're right, it should have been stuff about Sargent. It should have
just been a general thing. We've seen a trend of drivers doing this and we want to address it, and I think if they weren't like that,
you get Lewis Hamilton and it hits the headlines.
Yes.
Logan Sargent does not break the headlines and make the splash that they want, so that's why they single out Lewis.
There's some clickbait to it for sure.
In the other world of motorsport, leaving F1, the news that we saw a little bit this week was Jenson Button back in a car, racing for JDC Miller Motorsports in the Porsche 963, lovely, at the Petit Le Mans, which is petite compared to the normal Le Mans, but it is still a 10-hour race. So it's quite a way. Tell me a little bit about this, right?
Yeah, it's a race. I did it in 2016, and that race is completely bonkers. It's completely insane. There's like 54 cars on a 1 minute 10 lap, and it's a massively high-speed circuit with no runoff. You race into the dark. The weather at that time of year is also a bit sketchy. I remember this circuit is completely bonkers. I had one really annoying incident, right? I was supposed to fly. I was supposed to fly on the Wednesday, and practice was on Friday. Anyway, I hadn't received my flight ticket from the team, so I kept messaging them saying, "Where's my ticket? Where's my ticket? Where's my ticket?" And I eventually got the ticket, but they booked it for the wrong day. And so I arrived. I arrived at the circuit at 1 a.m. the day before first practice, and first practice was at 8 o'clock. So I didn't get time to do a track walk or anything like that. And we didn't have simulators in these days, or good simulators. So we came out, and I was on my outlap. And we came up to the last corner after the chicane, and it's so blind, you're just seeing sky. And I had a car in front of me, pulled to the right, and I knew that was where the pit entrance is. So I thought to myself, okay, he's going into the pits. I wasn't going into the pits. So I just went straight. Well, it turned out that the apex for the corner is actually under the bridge. And so
God.
I ended up going straight on. Unfortunately, that's where the old pits was. So I had to go down the old pit lane. And fortunately, radio is not broadcast in practice because there was a lot of very angry words going on. But that just shows you how crazy this track is.
Yeah.
It's that blind that if you didn't turn before that bridge, you weren't going to make that corner. So for Jenson to do that, and he said it himself on his Instagram, I saw it's the craziest race he's ever done. I think he ended up P5, which, to be honest, even finishing Petit is a success in itself. And if you go and have a look at some of the crashes that happened over the weekend. But it's nice to see Jenson's doing, obviously he's done the Goodwood race, which we spoke about. Yeah. He's coming to sports cars. He's enjoying his racing again. It's really good to see that.
I like him a lot. I think he comes across like a really good guy.
He looks like someone who just loves motorsport.
Yeah.
He's a junkie for racing, and I'm all for that.
It also keeps pundits relevant. If they're back in the car, I think it's very easy to sort of step away and just be that critique and that sort of pundit voice, but to actually get back in the car, especially when you're doing a race like that.
Oh, and there's some serious. I mean, there's serious drivers in there. Plenty of XF1 drivers, plenty of Le Mans winners, plenty of World Endurance champions, North American champions. It's a seriously high level. And just to show the level, there's actually one team in the category that Jenson was racing in, which has got a collaboration with Andretti Autosport, which is obviously going to be the new team that's trying to come into Formula One.
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
That's quite huge in itself, because when you've got so much pedigree in the pack and you finish fifth, that's big.
No, he did good. As I said, just to finish that race is an achievement, man. I can tell you.
Is that because you went down the pit lane?
Fortunately, that was practice one. We ended up finishing fourth. So.
Okay, great. Right. Let's have a little bit of fun. Richard knows I like my games. I'm very games orientated. When we don't have a race, I go, right, come on, what are we doing? And I'll tell you exactly what we're doing today. We are going to mix up the Formula One team. So I have two very high budget bowls here. One of the bowls has all 10 cars, and the other bowl has all 20 drivers. And so we're going to be pulling out a name, for example, Logan Sargent, pulling out a car, could be the Mercedes, and then pulling out another name, Max Verstappen, and another car, the McLaren, and then arguing who would win over the course of a season, driver and in a random car. So I'll tell you what, Jamie, why don't you take the drivers, pull out a driver, I'll pull out a car. So our first combination today is, who have you got?
Very, very general. Carlos
Sainz, and I've got the Alpine. So who's going to win out of Carlos Sainz and Alpine? Richard, why don't you take the other name out? Carlos Sainz in an Alpine versus
Daniel Ricciardo.
Oh, Daniel Ricciardo in a Red Bull.
Oh.
Oh, okay. So open discussion. Go. Initial thoughts.
I mean, we kind of already have a good idea of what Ricciardo's like in a Red Bull.
Yeah, and also the fact that he knows that team and that car, and they know him. He'd be able to extract more performance out of that car than most people jumping into it the first time.
The Alpine isn't necessarily the high-end sports car that they would have you believe it to be. Yeah. Sainz is a competent driver, but I think Ricciardo's edging him every race.
And just remember, Sainz has actually driven for that team as well before in his Renault guys.
Yes.
And so he knows it, but Ricciardo, you've got to go with him all day, I think.
Ricciardo in a Red Bull, I mean, that's
a pretty good combo,
Yeah, I think it's difficult to put any when the Red Bull comes out, it's difficult with any driver really to argue that they wouldn't win in it across a season.
We have the George Russell in a Mercedes argument that we had a few years back. Like, you took legitimate back runner and put them in the title car, and you kind of already get that answer. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to sort of naysay that it's always the car, but you could put a lot of back runners in Verstappen's car, and you'd probably get the same result.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Not being too pessimistic there, but the Red Bull is a rocket ship, so
All right, so let's keep Carlos and Ricciardo out, but I'll put the cars back in, so we might see the cars again. Give me another driver, Jamie. Who we got?
We have got Yuki Tsunoda.
Okay, Yuki Tsunoda in a Haas.
Oh, blimey.
It's not gonna feel like.
Can you imagine the radio messages about the deg?
Or Richard, give us another driver.
We got Zhou Guanyu.
Zhou Guanyu in a McLaren.
It's
Joe.
all day long.
Yeah.
Got to be. If it was the McLaren of early in the season,
yes.
it might be another conversation.
No, that would be a very different
In
conversation.
this McLaren.
In this current guise,
It's
yes.
Joe, yeah.
And I think, as we said, I think Joe is. I think he's just a bit. He's a bit boring in that he's not spectacular with his driving. And Bottas, as I said it on the last podcast, I said that's the most boring driver lineup you could ever have because they just get on with their job in a really professional way. And, I think Joe competing against Bottas, who we saw how good he was against one of the greatest of all time. And I think that Joe is doing a very, very good job. And I think it's just because he's just doing it so professionally and getting on with it. I mean, the only exciting thing about Joe at the minute is his fashion sense on a Thursday.
I think so.
Yeah.
Everything else, he just gets on with it.
But that's kind of testament to a good Formula One driver.
Exactly.
You've got nothing to say about him.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
He's just a good Formula One driver.
I would have been, when there was talk about him losing his seat for this year, I think that would have been really, really unjustified if
I think
that
both
happened.
him and Yuki, you can sort of push that
Yeah.
they're both competent drivers. They stay out of the wall more than most.
Yeah.
And you've only got to look at Logan Sargent this year.
Exactly. No, I'm a big fan of Joe. Very
Yeah.
big fan of him.
Yeah, I think Joe takes Yuki on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's again.
Also,
but-
I mean, the Haas is not the competitive car that you want it to be.
No, particularly on the races that go a bit longer, it doesn't quite land the same way.
I would love to have the radio of
Yeah.
Magnussen and
Yuki.
Yeah, that would be entertainment.
You know what would be
Entertainment would be
best?
high.
If I had them on a test day, I would just have the radio so they could talk to each other as well.
that's kind of what you want, isn't it? There's no third party, just driver to driver.
Give me another driver.
All right, we have got. There we go. K-Mags.
Kevin Magnussen in an Aston Martin
I like that.
versus
That is an interesting one, actually.
I mean, it can't happen.
Max
because-
Verstappen.
Max Verstappen in a
Williams.
This could be interesting.
Williams.
Oh, it is an interesting one, that.
Okay.
Kevin Magnussen
That is
in an
actually a
Aston...
very interesting one because Albon's getting some serious results out of that Williams.
That's levelled it up
Yeah,
quite.
that's tricky.
So let's confirm that. So Kevin Magnussen in an Aston Martin versus Max Verstappen in a Williams across a season. Who gets more points?
I'm going to have to go Max, I think.
Barely.
The only reason I'm going to go Max, he makes less mistakes than Magnussen.
Yeah. K-Mags does like the back of people's cars, so or finding that extra spin in the
Yeah.
lap somewhere.
I think at a track like Monza, Max in a Williams would maybe even get on the podium or something,
Yes.
right? He'd do really well. But then you go places, and we're talking about the course of a season, you go places like Monaco, for example, the Aston Martin, K-Mag could put quite an good performance in the Aston Martin.
I think in terms of pure pace that they'd be very even. Maybe even Magnussen a touch ahead because the Aston, depending on what guys it's in, but it is a very competitive car. We saw that with Alonso.
the Aston that Alonso drives.
Exactly. Not the Stroll one. We need to check the chassis numbers, yeah. But I think that as I said, I think K-Mag will just make too many mistakes over a season versus Max. It's one thing that Max has really ironed out of his driving style.
The attrition rate with Max over the course of a season is steadily getting less and less and less.
Exactly.
I think we've got to a point now with Verstappen where he will take the runoff rather than the collision.
Yeah.
Whereas the
Which in the
hot-headed
past,
Max of years,
Yeah.
he would happily have, no, this is all or nothing, we'll take the collision.
Yeah.
Whereas now, take the runoff, go fight for it again on the next turn.
Yeah.
So you're, to confirm it, which way are you going on this?
Max.
Max, barely.
Max in the Williams
Barely.
just does Kevin
Just.
Magnussen in the Aston.
Mostly
just.
because of your point that Albon has got a lot out of that Williams.
Actually, that was Richard's point, but I'll take the credit for it. I'll take the
Whoever
credit.
said it.
I got a motorsport brain. I won Le Mans.
Again, that is another example of us only picking one driver from a team that's getting something out of a car as well. But,
I mean, those two teams, you couldn't, the Stroll and Sargent look like they're in a different category sometimes to Alonso and Albon.
Yeah.
No, I mean, just before we move on, because the Lance Stroll beating seems like to be on every podcast, but it is an example of like Sebastian Vettel and then Fernando Alonso. It's not exactly the best run of teammates to have if you're meant to be, the key driver, as it were.
You feel sorry for people like that. There's a website which has listed the worst Formula One drivers of all time, and one of them on
Cruel.
there, it's
Cruel.
very
It is
cruel.
so cruel.
And one of them on there is actually a good buddy of mine called Alex Young, who I do quite a bit of work with now, and he was at Minardi in 2001 and 2002. And Alex is actually, he's been very competent. He's won races in A1 GP against, Hulkenberg and Verstappen and people, and Jos Verstappen and people like that. And he's won a lot of GT championships as well. A very, very competent driver. But, you felt a bit sorry for him because apart from a few issues, his teammates were Mark Webber and Fernando Alonso.
What are you expecting?
You feel a bit sorry for him. When you look at some of the other people who have gone through Minardi, he's probably got the two greatest Minardi drivers of all time.
Yeah, that's tough.
I mean, especially with those teams like Minardi, like Manor, where they're like the breeding ground a lot of the time. It's very hard for you to go.
Very tough. And you see, Stroll, he is. You do have to feel sorry for him in that respect that he is up against two serious drivers.
If his dad didn't have his heart set on my son will be a motorsport champion, I think it would be a lot easier for him.
Yeah.
Because genuinely, I think Lawrence would let him go somewhere else.
I'm sure he would.
I mean, Lance could probably do a great job in a AlphaTauri or an Alfa Romeo.
Do you think?
Yeah, I genuinely do.
I mean, he didn't do a bad job in the Williams. Remember that, yeah?
Yeah.
He was pretty good in that.
In saying that, I mean, if the pressure is taken off him that it's his dad's company and it's his dad's team and all that sort of stuff, and I have to be a champion and actually progress as a driver instead of being forced down an avenue that might not be for another 2-3 years. Because bearing in mind, we're talking about drivers as if they're not good drivers. Like, these are still the elite of the elite.
I mean,
of course.
Lance Stroll, he was still European Formula 3 champion.
Exactly.
And he went straight from Formula 3 into Formula 1.
Which is a big jump.
It's a huge
if
jump.
you're not doing the F2
especially that guy's a Formula 3 car as well. The ones that he drove only had about 230 horsepower, and they're like, hey, here's a hybrid Formula 1 car with 1,000 horsepower.
Yes.
Have fun.
A little bit different.
I mean, even sort of drivers from F2 like Drogovic and guys of that ilk that you go, that's a big jump for them. And
absolutely.
They're driving cars that are more akin.
I mean, I spoke to Marcus Ericsson a few years ago, and I asked him, I was doing a Formula 3 test, and he was getting ready for his Formula 1 gig, and I said to him, what's it like driving an F1 car? And he said the jump from GP2 to F1 is way bigger than the jump from F3 to GP2.
Yeah.
Way bigger in terms of the car feeling. And even when I went into Super Formula, Japan's version of F1, that from F3, that was a huge.
They say that's as close to F1 as you can get, right?
Oh yeah, they were. Yeah, I mean, the quickest time I ever did at Fuji was 3 seconds off Hamilton's pole time from the 2008 race. I think my qualifying time from Suzuka was 2 seconds quicker than the fastest lap of the F1 race of the same year. I mean, they're crazy fast.
That's
ridiculous. That's why a lot of the guys, like Liam Lawson,
that's
where
Lawson,
he's been doing his
that's
stuff.
exactly what he's been doing this year.
Yeah.
And that's why that doesn't have that rookie curse that a lot of other drivers have had, because he's had that breeding ground and that treatment.
Exactly.
Well, we might get him in a minute, so let's pull out another couple of drivers. Who have you got?
Esteban
Ocon in an Alfa Romeo.
Blimey. Okay.
Versus
Talk of the devil, Lance Stroll.
Lance Stroll in a McLaren. So Ocon in an Alfa Romeo versus Lance Stroll in a McLaren. Again, we're talking about the McLaren. We're talking about the McLaren as it is today.
Yes.
Over the course of a season,
the one that is finishing second and third.
I'm going to go for Stroll.
Yeah, it has to, given the fact that I've just not beat down on Lance Stroll.
I'm going to go for Stroll because one of the same things. I think it would be very, very close, but Stroll is more consistent than Ocon is.
Not as hot-headed as well.
Not as hot-headed, yeah.
Unless it's your personal trainer. That's
Yeah, but I thought, when you saw that, I mean, that's just kind of emotion. You've seen substitutes in football do it, and nobody makes a big deal out of that. People are allowed to be angry.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about the golden era a lot, and Schumacher making his way to the McLaren pit lane
in Spa in '98. Yeah,
like there are perfect, and you can't. And Alonso said it the other day. You don't want to sanitize the fact that your Formula 1 drivers are personalities.
Exactly, and
it's fueled on adrenaline.
Yeah, he had a bad session, I think, and he's allowed to react. He's a human being. It's quite normal, and as I said, we see it in every single sport. It's very normal. But no, I think that Stroll would get that.
Ocon, if he's in a different car, would challenge more. But
I
not
also,
in an
I want the Stroll with the form that he was on at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
I don't want the Stroll that I've got now. Not the Stroll who hasn't scored any points since the summer break came over.
Yeah.
I want the one that we had in Bahrain who still performed with that injury. The one we had in Jeddah, where he was decent.
Well,
not on
with
Alonso's
wrist
level.
fractures and you're still performing.
Exactly.
That's huge. And I think this season has sort of beaten the life out of him competitively a little bit, and he's sort of like resigned himself to, I'm not as good as Fernando, which is, I mean, half the field are not as good as Fernando.
Yeah.
So
I'd say more than half.
More than
definitely. Yeah. Give me another driver.
Another driver. We have got. I'm trying not to shiver.
We're not going to talk about how cold it is.
How cold it is. Your friend of mine, Sergio Perez.
Sergio Perez in a Ferrari.
All right.
Okay. Nico Hulkenberg.
Nico Hulkenberg in a Aston Martin. I think you've got to go for Perez there in the Ferrari. Surely.
But which Perez am I getting?
Are we getting Perez
we
now
get-
or Perez
Perez
start of the
today?
season?
No.
It's Hulkenberg.
No, it's Hulkenberg.
It's Hulkenberg.
So you think Hulkenberg and Aston Martin would do a better job
And which
than
Aston
Perez?
is it? Is it today's Aston?
Today's Aston.
It's very even.
It's very
Over
even.
a season as well.
This is way more even than I
This
thought
is-
it was
yeah.
going to be.
What does that say about Sergio Perez? That we're saying at the minute, a slower car, Nico Hulkenberg would do a better job than him.
Over the course of a season, I think.
But Hulkenberg hasn't been getting enough credit for how good a job he's been doing. You know,
because he's in the mid-range car that no one's
exactly.
looking
Magnussen is a known quantity in Formula One, and he's consistently
at.
beating him.
He's essentially a super sub as well.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't meant to have this seat. He's not meant to have been.
Exactly. And Nico Hulkenberg, you look at his junior career, the guy's won everything.
Yes.
He put a Williams on pole. The only the only reason he didn't continue in his seat after that was because Maldonado came along with Venezuela.
All of Venezuela.
But the
I'm really torn on this.
it's hard, isn't it?
I think Sergio Perez in a Ferrari would do a better job than Nico Hulkenberg in an Aston Martin over the course of a season. I do.
Yeah, but that's the problem with Perez though this year. He's been so up and down.
Yeah.
We're not giving Hulkenberg the credence of the fact that he's got very few DNFs. He's not going into the back of people. He can actually race. He's just in an underpowered car. So put him in the Aston Martin.
Yeah, he's just in a degradation
And
special.
also, you would probably get a better teamwork from Alonso and Hulkenberg as well. You'd probably get two cars working together.
And do you remember what we've been saying about doing the basics right? And
My
Perez
favourite
hasn't
phrase.
been doing his basics. Well, what's the one thing that Hulkenberg can do with a car which has that
All
much
the
debt?
time.
He can just qualify it well, and every single time he does the job.
And he
without
has
fail.
out-qualified people that he has no right to out-qualify.
He would put the Aston Martin in Q3 every time.
Every single time, and that's exactly what you want. I would, over the course of a season, I'm sure Perez. It's the sort of thing where Perez would probably win more races or finish ahead of Hulkenberg more, but Hulkenberg will just consistently go bang, 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 and he'll get more points over a season.
Very interesting. Give me another couple of drivers. Who you got?
Valtteri Bottas.
Valtteri Bottas in... the Merc.
Oh, okay.
In his old
this is-
Mercedes. Well, this year's Mercedes.
But this year's
This could be very jazzy. We've got Fernando Alonso.
Fernando Alonso in... an Alpine.
It's got to be Valtteri. It's Valtteri, 100%. There's no question.
Just because the Mercedes is
The consistency.
So- and also, we've seen what Valtteri does in that team. He does a good job. He was never bad in that Merc.
He wasn't a bad teammate.
No.
He knew his place and he did it very well.
Yeah, to be honest, and he literally said it himself. If Merc offered me some job security, then he would have still been at Merc.
Yeah.
I tell you what I was thinking this week, because there's been so many rumblings about is Sergio Perez going to be driving in 2024, right? And then people go, okay, well, who would his replacement be? Valtteri Bottas.
That is a
Correct.
made.
Valtteri
that is-
Bottas doesn't mind being a number 2 driver.
Yeah.
Our favourite quote, or your favourite quote that you've told me a few times this season, he never missed out on Q3 in the Mercedes. That's all he needs to do in
Yeah.
that Red Bull
Exactly.
is back it
And
up. He's the
that is a-
dream
Yeah.
number
Team player,
2 to Max
easy.
Verstappen.
And that's better support than what Verstappen is getting.
And also
at
the
the
other
moment.
thing for Red Bull as a brand as well, he's actually very, very good because you actually see what he does with his lifestyle with the sort of extreme crazy stuff the Finnish do. The random naked postings in a
Yeah.
pond, the
I mean,
cycling
he's
that he
becoming
does.
the Kimi Räikkönen.
I mean, he competed in I think it was the European Mountain Bike Championships a few weeks ago.
just because he can.
So good.
Yeah,
And he's got a mullet and a moustache. I mean, who doesn't love him?
He's got Red Bull marketing all over.
Yeah, he's like a Scandinavian Danny Ricciardo.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I
don't
he'd
think
be
it'll
a great
happen.
shout.
I think it'll be Ricciardo. He'll just walk into that
It
seat,
would
but,
be Ricciardo.
But
Again,
Valtteri Bottas is a great shout.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. Let's go quick fire for the last couple.
Oscar
Here we
Piastri.
go. Piastri in a Aston versus
Lewis Hamilton.
Lewis Hamilton in a AlphaTauri. Oh,
It's Oscar.
Oscar, yeah.
It's Oscar just
Oscar,
because
yeah.
of the car.
Yeah.
Like
And Oscar's performing
but
now.
the Aston Martin isn't that quick at the minute.
No, but Oscar
it's-
is.
and it's faster than AlphaTauri.
Yeah, and I think honestly, right now, I think Oscar's probably at this in the current form. We're talking about form lately.
Yeah,
I think that Piastri is faster than Lewis.
This
right
isn't
now.
Lewis of 3 years ago.
Say that again, Richard. I'm going to scream.
In current form, I'm not saying overall. I'm saying in current form. I think that Oscar Piastri is driving faster than Lewis Hamilton is right now.
Yeah.
In current form.
And then we'll get to Texas. And
That's it.
Qualified 17th.
The gust of wind will come for Oscar.
I'm processing
dust
that.
in the wind, and that'll be it.
Oh God.
In current form.
Where are you going,
Absolutely
Joe?
he is.
I can't.
We've already had a Lewis Hamilton argument this week.
I struggle so much with recency bias.
Yeah, but what
I was talking about current form,
What
but
can you go on? I mean, Lewis, I think in Qatar he didn't do anything special in terms of qualifying in the sprints, whereas Oscar was mega.
Also, are you not saying that the Aston is better than the Alpha?
Yeah.
yes, the Aston is better than the is it the AlphaTauri? Yeah, absolutely.
They need to.
And
better team
our
names.
most recent new winner in Formula One racing is in the form of his life.
Yes.
So
All right, I'm not going to
100%.
fight you on anymore before this gets physical. All right, give me
Charles
another
Leclerc.
one. Charles Leclerc in a Ferrari.
Oh. Okay.
In his actual car.
Alex Albon.
Alex Albon in a Haas. Okay, that
Okay,
one's easy.
yeah.
Charles
Yeah,
Leclerc, I think we'll go
next.
for there. I love you, Albon. but-
Sorry,
Come on,
Alex.
sorry, mate.
All right. I'm losing dexterity. What's going on?
How many you got left?
2.
Two.
Nice.
After this.
All right, we got Lando.
Lando in a Red Bull. It's going to take a hell of a lot of beating.
Lando next season.
Yeah.
George Russell.
Against George Russell in a Ferrari. I mean, I'm going Lando
You
personally in the
go
Red
Lando.
Bull.
The
Right,
Red
Lando.
Bull is a
Too
rocket
quick.
ship, and then he's going to be a more consistent finisher than Sergio has been this year.
I also-
We'd have a closer first and second if Lando was in a Red Bull.
And
I
Red
think-
Bull won't screw up the pit stops.
No.
Yeah, that's thanks very much, Richard. I also
mate.
think Lando's a better driver than George. Just putting that one out there.
One of the outstanding performers of this season, Logan Sargent.
Logan Sargent in an AlphaTauri. Oh, I think we know where this one's going.
Pierre Gasly.
Pierre Gasly in an Alfa Romeo. Probably Pierre
It's got to be
Gasly.
Yeah.
Gasly. Yeah, it's got to be Gasly.
As much as he's had a rough time of it, Pierre
Yeah.
Gasly, like it's still the car's good enough and he's good
Yeah,
enough. And
yeah,
Logan
it's
Sargent.
He's not having fun.
I mean, Logan's magnet that gets attracted to every tyre wall is kind of a problem.
Is he there next year?
No, he's not. I mean,
Still unconfirmed.
yeah, but you've got 19 drivers that are confirmed. Does that not say it all?
And you've
really?
also got probably 6,500 of them who want his seat.
Yes.
And so yeah, I think I can't see him being there.
There-
next
there
year.
are-
and I don't. And I think the annoying thing is I think he's good enough
Yes.
to be there, and I think he's proven many times that he's good enough to be there. But you know, it's just not going to happen.
There are so many either test drivers, number 3s, or backup
Ian Lawson.
drivers. Yes,
Perfect
that
example.
would have done a better performance this year. And you've only got to look at Nick De Vries not getting long enough, and across the board, if you cannot perform within the first 5-10 races, I'm quite surprised that he's got as long as he has. He's been quite lucky in that sense.
And I think the delta, because Albon's had such a good season,
Yes.
it shows
The
he's
other-
extracting. He also, I think, to sort of defend Logan for a second, he's had all the upgrades. Albon has had all the upgrades,
course, yeah.
and Logan hasn't had all.
there's-
So his
Well,
car
that's because
is
they don't want
slower.
to keep digging them out of
but
tyres.
There's a lot. This is the other thing with Formula One. There's a lot we don't know that goes on behind the scenes. I go back to that previous story about Alex Young being teammates with Fernando Alonso and Mark Webber. Well, Minardi had no budget that year, so only one car could afford power steering. So Alex Young never had power steering when he was in Formula One,
Madness.
and no one knows about that.
That's mad.
And that's obviously it's not the same situation with Williams. There's much more healthier than Minardi, but I can't see him there next year. I feel bad for him, but it's just reality.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that feels like a natural place to wrap it up. Thanks for playing my game. Did you enjoy it?
Yes, it was
How
interesting.
decent.
Fantastic. We are going to leave it there, but we've got a lot more coming for you in the coming weeks. And of course, we'll be covering everything that goes on in the second Grand Prix in America this season, back to the United States. So stick with us. We are On Track GP. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate your time. And we'll see you very soon. Take care.